She dressed the most powerful people in the city, and never learned their names. When everything disappeared, all she had left was thread and her own hands. Evelyn Carter was born far from any market road or ancient trade line, yet her life slowly aligned with what people once called the Silk Road. Though she never used that name back then, she grew up surrounded by silence and order, learning early that beauty was power and control. Her first memories of fabric were not warm, they were sharp. They were rules, colors that could not touch, shapes that must obey. She believed elegance was a wall between her and the ordinary world. As she grew older, she learned how to speak to wealth, how to look through people who could not offer influence. Her talent was obvious and precise. She studied design in quiet rooms under cold lights. She learned how luxury walks and how it never looks back. When her fashion house opened, it carried her name in clean letters. The city noticed immediately. Models moved like glass figures without weight. Clients arrived in black cars and left without smiles. They wanted status, and Evelyn gave them armor made of silk and discipline. She dressed senators and investors in distant airs. She never asked their story. She only measured shoulders in silence. In interviews, she spoke about vision and legacy. She never spoke about hands that work. She believed creation was an idea, not a process. Factories were invisible to her. Names of workers never stayed in her mind. When she passed through streets, she avoided eye contact with vendors and tailors and small shops. She thought closeness to craft was weakness. Her brand grew fast because distance felt expensive. Magazines praised her cold precision. Critics called her untouchable. She accepted that word gladly. Untouchable meant safe. Untouchable meant above the dust. Yet somewhere far away, threads were moving, machines were slowing, orders were changing, and a road older than memory was preparing to pull her back, not with force, but with patience, like silk sliding through fingers. Success changed Evelyn Carter in ways she never questioned. Each season arrived like a command, not a moment. Shows were timed perfectly. Lights obeyed her. Music felt distant and controlled. The audience was always the same faces trained to admire without emotion. They clapped because clapping was expected. Backstage assistants moved quickly and quietly. She noticed mistakes but never effort. When a dress failed, she blamed carelessness, never fatigue. To her, the world was divided into those who decide and those who execute. She believed this division was natural and necessary. At private dinners, she spoke about culture and refinement. She described ordinary people as noise. She said progress required separation. Her guests nodded and smiled. They wore her designs like proof of belonging. She felt powerful watching them mirror her distance. When letters arrived from small retailers asking for collaboration, she ignored them. When local artisans requested meetings, she declined politely. Through assistance, she believed tradition slowed innovation and hands-on work dulled vision. Her factories were far away by design. She did not want to smell fabric dust or hear machines. She wanted silence and glass and smooth floors. The brand expanded into other cities. Always the same tone, always the same detachment. Profit grew steadily. Investors praised her efficiency. She was invited to panels where she spoke about global movement of goods without naming the people who moved them. She used words like scale and optimization. Never people, never lives. She thought the old trade routes were obsolete, romantic ideas for museums, yet unknowingly her brand followed those same paths. Fabric traveled across borders, designs crossed oceans, money returned like a tide. But tides change and winds shift, and one decision made in a distant boardroom would soon unravel everything she believed was permanent. The change did not arrive with drama. It arrived as a meeting, a quiet room, a long table, faces she had seen many times but never truly read. They spoke about efficiency and margins and new directions. Words floated without weight until one sentence landed. Production would be relocated, costs would be reduced, partnerships would shift. Evelyn listened without reaction. She assumed this was temporary. She believed control was permanent. She signed documents without reading deeply, trusting systems she had built. Distance had always protected her. Weeks passed, deliveries slowed, samples returned, altered quality slipped in subtle ways. Clients noticed first, silence replaced praise. Assistants whispered, investors asked questions, magazines delayed features. Evelyn visited the factory for the first time in years. The air felt wrong, the machines were unfamiliar, the people were new. They followed instructions but not intention. She realized too late that her name no longer commanded care, it only commanded output. When she objected, contracts spoke louder, numbers overruled vision. The board thanked her for her contribution and suggested a strategic step back. Her office was emptied in one afternoon. Glass walls reflected a woman she barely recognized. Orders were cancelled, licenses revoked, stores closed one by one. The brand that once felt untouchable dissolved quietly. No scandal, no headlines, just absence. Invitations stopped, messages went unanswered. The city moved on. Evelyn returned to her apartment overlooking streets she had never walked. She sat among garments she could no longer sell. She touched fabric without purpose. For the first time there was no team, no audience, no distance, only material and memory, and a skill she had avoided for years waited in silence like a door she had locked herself away from. Silence became the loudest presence in Evelyn Carter's life. Days stretched without meetings, without schedules, without purpose. She woke up late and slept without dreams. The apartment felt too large and too clean, like a showroom with no visitors. She avoided mirrors because they showed time she could not manage. She sold furniture first, then art, then clothes she once considered untouchable. Each sale felt like shedding a layer of protection. Friends from the industry stopped calling their sympathy felt rehearsed. In short, she stopped attending events because she no longer had a role on the streets. She walked slower not by choice but because no one moved aside for her anymore. She noticed hands everywhere, hands carrying boxes, hands fixing doors, hands sewing in small windows. These hands once blended into background noise, now they demanded attention. One afternoon she opened a storage box filled with old tools, scissors, needles, chalk, spools of thread. She had kept them out of habit, not affection. Holding them felt unfamiliar and heavy. Sewing had always been beneath her, something delegated, something done far away, but now the idea of paying someone else felt impossible. Pride had become expensive. She tried to sketch, but ideas felt empty. Without structure, without audience, design felt meaningless. What remained was fabric and time. She stitched poorly at first, uneven lines, crooked edges. The work demanded patience and humility, two qualities she had never valued. Each mistake stayed visible, no assistant to correct it, no factory to absorb it. She felt frustration, then shame, then something quieter. Focus. The room filled with the sound of thread passing through cloth. It was not elegant, it was honest, and for the first time in years she felt connected to the act of making, not the image of it. Evelyn did not tell anyone she had started sewing again. There was no announcement, no plan. It felt like admitting failure. She worked at night when the city softened and expectations disappeared. The first garments were simple, almost plain. She repaired old pieces, then altered them, then slowly created new ones. Her hands ached, her back protested. The rhythm was slow and unforgiving. She ruined fabric she could not easily replace. Each error taught restraint. She learned to listen to material instead of commanding it. Silk resisted pressure, cotton forgave mistakes, wool remembered every movement. These lessons were physical, not theoretical. She began to understand why older crafts survived without applause. They demanded presence. A neighbor noticed her work and asked for a small repair. Evelyn hesitated, then agreed without payment. The gratitude felt strange and undeserved. Word traveled quietly. One request became two, then five. People did not ask about labels or history, they asked if something could be made to last. She set up a tiny workspace near a street corner. No sign, no branding, just a table, a lamp, and patience. She spoke more with her hands than her voice. People shared stories while she measured and pinned. She listened because she had no reason not to. The work was tiring but grounding. Each finished piece carried imperfection and care. She no longer chased perfection, she chased honesty. In this small exchange she felt something unfamiliar, respect, not tied to wealth or distance, respect earned through time, attention, and effort. A different kind of value was forming, one that could not be outsourced or relocated. The workshop slowly became part of the street rhythm. People passed and nodded, some stopped just to watch. There was no glass barrier, no silence enforced by design, only fabric, light, and movement. Evelyn learned names and routines. A delivery driver who needed stronger seams, a teacher who wanted a coat repaired, not replaced, an older man who asked for a jacket like the one he remembered from youth. She did not rush them. Time was now her main resource. She priced work modestly, not out of strategy but fairness. Money covered rent and materials, nothing more, yet something richer returned. Stories, gratitude, trust. She began to wake early with intention. The city sounded different when she listened. Instead of trends she observed needs, instead of seasons she followed wear and repair. She sourced fabric locally, touching every roll, asking questions, learning origins. The path each material took felt like a modern Silk Road, not built on conquest or status, but exchange and care. People recommended her not because of a name but because of results. She never corrected them when they mispronounced her last name. It no longer mattered. One day a young designer asked to watch her work. Evelyn almost refused, then she remembered her past distance. She agreed and explained every step openly. Knowledge no longer felt like power to guard but something to pass on. The workshop grew warmer, not larger. Respect filled the space. Quietly she no longer dressed elite, she dressed lives, and in doing so she felt more seen than she ever had on any runway. As months passed, Evelyn noticed patterns beyond fabric. The flow of people mirrored ancient routes. Needs traveled faster than goods. A torn sleeve carried a story. A worn collar held years of habit. She began marking where materials came from and where finished pieces went, not on maps but in memory. A scarf repaired in the morning warmed someone on a night shift. A jacket altered at noon crossed the city. By evening this movement felt familiar yet newly understood. She realized the old Silk Road was never just about luxury, it was about connection, survival, and shared skill. Her workshop became a small node in a living network. People exchanged advice while waiting. Someone brought tea, someone else swept the floor without being asked. No one spoke of status. Titles dissolved in the presence of work. Evelyn's past occasionally surfaced. Someone would recognize her name from old magazines. She did not deny it, she did not explain either. The work spoke louder. Former industry contacts visited out of curiosity, expecting a story of downfall. They found a woman focused, steady, and grounded. No bitterness, no apology. She had nothing to prove. Fabric replaced ambition, thread replaced ego. In this space, value moved hand to hand, not screen to screen. The respect she received could not be purchased, scaled, or transferred. It arrived slowly like trade once did, carried by trust, effort, and time. And she understood then that she had not lost everything. She had finally joined the road she once ignored. Recognition returned in a form Evelyn did not expect. There were no cameras, no stages, no contracts. A local paper mentioned the workshop in a small column. Words like reliable and thoughtful replaced visionary and bold. People traveled from other neighborhoods not for trend but for trust. She noticed how differently they looked at her, not up, not down, but directly. Children sat nearby watching her hands, learning patience without instruction. She answered questions honestly, including when she did not know. The respect she felt now was quiet but steady. It did not disappear when the lights went off one afternoon. A representative from a luxury group visited, offering partnership and scale. They spoke carefully, avoiding old mistakes. Evelyn listened and declined without anger. She understood now what growth cost: distance, speed, and detachment. She chose limits. Instead, she trained 2 apprentices not to expand but to sustain. She paid them fairly and expected care in return. The workshop adjusted its pace around people, not profit. The street changed with it. Other small businesses opened nearby: a repair shop, a bakery, a bookstand. Movement followed attention, not marketing. Evelyn walked the streets she once avoided, greeting vendors by name. She was no longer invisible and no longer elevated. She belonged, and belonging felt heavier and more valuable than admiration ever had. With time, Evelyn stopped thinking about success as a destination. It became a practice repeated daily. She measured days by usefulness, not visibility. Some evenings she stayed late repairing garments that carried no profit, only necessity. She remembered her earlier belief that creation began with ideas. Now she knew it began with care. The old industry continued without her. New names replaced old ones. Trends accelerated and vanished. She watched without longing. Occasionally young designers asked for advice, expecting strategy. She spoke about patience, listening, and limits. Some understood, others smiled politely in return to speed. She accepted that not all roads intersect. The Silk Road had never forced travel, it offered passage. Her hands grew stronger and calmer. Each stitch felt intentional, not impressive. She no longer needed her name displayed. People knew where to find her. That was enough. When she walked home, she noticed small details she once missed: light in windows, sounds of work, laughter, effort. These were the true signs of prosperity. She realized the respect she earned could not be taken by markets or boards. It lived in memory and routine, and repaired seams and returned customers and shared silence. And in that realization she felt a quiet pride, not sharp, not distant, but warm and enduring. Years later, when people spoke of Evelyn Carter, they did not mention collapse or comeback. They spoke of consistency. The workshop remained small by choice. The door stayed open, the work stayed honest. She kept the same table, the same lamp, the same quiet focus. The Silk Road she now walked had no beginning and no end. It moved through people, through hands, through shared effort. She no longer needed distance to feel secure. She no longer feared closeness. Fabric still traveled, but meaning traveled with it. Every piece carried respect earned, not assumed. She understood that dignity could not be worn as armor. It had to be practiced daily, in choosing repair over excess, in choosing presence over scale, in choosing people over image. When she stitched, she felt part of something older than fashion, older than markets, a living road made not of silk alone but of trust. And on that road she finally found what wealth had promised but never delivered: a place, a purpose, and a respect that stayed.